Hello and welcome to this third recording in the Azure Demo Series. So today's lab is focused on deploying and managing Microsoft Azure virtual networks. So I'll be going through different exercises, tasks, and that covers Azure virtual networks and deploying them using an template, using Azure PowerShell, and using Azure CLI. So the second part of this lab, I'll cover the configuration of an Azure vNet peering as well as custom routing for Azure Virtual Networks. So this is the instruction that I'll be following today. If I go back to the page that we've been referring to, and if I scroll down to Lab 02 this time, and then if I click on that, that will be on implementing and managing Azure networking. And as you can see, it has two parts. So that's the Lab A that we'll do, and then we'll conclude with Lab B, where we'll discuss peering. So I'm not sure yet, but this video may need to be divided into two, depending on the length or how long it takes to cover the entire lab. So let's get into this. So before proceeding, just ensure that you have your lab VM ready. And if you just completed the lab that we did earlier in the second video, ensure that you've cleaned up your Azure environment. First of all, let's log into our lab virtual machine. So I'll get my public IP address, bring up remote desktop, paste my IP address there and click on connect. My username is student. I'll type in my password. And I'll just drag this over to the screen. So now I'm logged into my lab VM and let's go through the rest of the process. So now I'm logged into my lab VM. The other thing that I'd like to share with you, if I go back here, is the steps that we'll be taking, and I'll be sharing the goals of each exercise and task with you so that you know ahead of time what we'll be covering. So let's get into it. The first thing that we'll do is we'll have to prepare our environment for this second lab. And to do that, we'll be using the custom PowerShell modules that we imported earlier. So let's get to that. So I'll right click PowerShell here and click on Run as Administrator. And on the screen, the first thing that I'll do is I'll set the execution policy to unrestricted, and then if I press enter to that and type A to allow that action, I'll go ahead and import the module add 20533D environment, and then if I press enter to that, I'll type R to allow that to run, and then I'll go ahead and run the command or the commandlet add 20533D environment, and then if I press enter to that, it should prompt me to sign into my Azure environment, and I'll show you in the background what it's trying to do. Before I go ahead and proceed with this, let's bring up Google Chrome and I'll log into my Azure environment. portal.azure.com. And by the way, the language is something you can ignore. So I'm getting the language because I'm using an Azure VM. Put in my email address and then put in my password. So now that I'm logged into my Azure environment, I'll go under resource groups to show you the resource groups that I currently have. And you can see I have only one, and that's the resource group that my lab VM resides. So if I click on the all resources, you see I only have 7 items. So what we'll do is for this test or for this lab environment, we'll actually be creating this environment. So this is the only thing that I currently have in my environment, my lab VM. But we're going to run the script, and the script that we're going to run to prepare our environment will actually create 2 virtual networks and 2 subnets in the first virtual network that you can see subnet 1, subnet 2, and then two Windows VMs within this subnet. And then within the second virtual network, a single subnet and a single Windows VM within that. And this is what we'll be using when we're doing our vNet peering lab later. But this will all be set up for us automatically by running that command to prepare the environment. Let's go ahead and do that. So if I go ahead and bring up PowerShell again, after running this command, it asks me which lab do I want to set up. In this case, ensure you enter lab number 2 and press enter. Now it says it's going to set up lab for lab 2A and lab 2B. Am I sure that I want to proceed? If I type Y for yes and press enter, it's going to ask me to sign into my Azure environment. So I put in my credentials again. And I'm signed into my Azure environment. If I go ahead and type R here to allow the script to run, so I'll just scroll up a bit. So it's going to ask me to carry on. So if I go ahead and type R to allow the other script to run. So it's asking me to specify a location that that the resources that will be deployed, that it will be deployed into. I usually like selecting West Europe, that's close to where I am. So I'll go ahead and type 5 there and press enter. It says my region is West Europe, and then it's going to proceed to try to set up the environment. Again, I'll type R to allow it to run. Now it's going to ask me to specify a virtual machine size. Now this depends on your environment. If you have an environment where you're close to the Azure limit for your region already, you may want to select a smaller VM size like standard D1 V2, something like that. But in my own case, there's no other resource running apart from my lab VM, so I'll select standard D2 V2 just to make the machines a bit faster. But there's nothing stopping you from selecting a smaller size of, from entering a smaller size of VM. So I'll enter standard D2 V2 and I'll go ahead and press enter to that. So at this point, it's going to begin some deployment in the background. If I go back to my Azure environment, you can see I have only 7 items. If I refresh this, you can see it's beginning to deploy different resources. So in order for you not to be confused as to what it's deploying, that's why I drew this diagram here to let you know that everything that you can see over here, that's what's been deployed by the script. That's what we'll end up with after that script concludes. What I'll do for now, because it will take a while to complete, so I'll go ahead and pause the recording, and when it prompts me to put in another value, I'm going to resume to show you that. Okay, so while the script is running, deploying resources, it's going to prompt you to enter the VM size again. So the reason for that, again, going back to this diagram, is it's creating two separate vNet, and it's going to create them in their own different resource groups. So this vNet will be in its own resource group. So what it's done is it finished creating this vNet. So if I go ahead and show that to you, if I go under resource groups, you see I have a new resource group now called D201. And within that resource group, I have two virtual machines, VM1 and VM2. But then going back, if I go to D202, it's got nothing in it. So it's asking for the VM size that it's going to use to deploy this virtual machine in this other subnet. So I'll go ahead and type in the same size as I did earlier. So I'll type in standard D2 V2 and press enter to that. So it's going to carry on with the deployment, and I'll pause the recording and then I'll come back once it's completed. Okay, so the script completed now. If I go back to the Azure portal, if I refresh this, essentially what we have here, going back on the resource groups, is we have two resource groups with all the resources that you can see on this section of the screen, and we'll get to this later. So we'll actually just created them, but we're not using them now. Excuse me. Let's move on to the next exercise and the next task. So going further, the next thing that we want to do is we want to create an Azure virtual network by using a deployment template. So to do that, let's go to this URL. So all these are within the instructions, by the way. So if I go to that URL, I get taken to an Azure Quick Start template that I can use to deploy virtual network with 2 subnets. If I wanted to, I could open this template and have a look within it. Let's make this a bit larger. And I can have a look within this and see how it works. But I can also show you another way. So if I go ahead and click, look at this and click on Deploy to Azure. Since I'm already logged into Azure, it's going to do single sign-on and just log me in and bring me to this screen here, where I can input the parameters that I want. So here I can click on Edit Template to view the template a bit. As you can see, there are 6 parameters to this template, and there's 1 variable and there's 1 resource. So if I go under the resource, you can see the resource type is virtual networks, and you can see where the subnet configuration is associated to the resource right here. I'll go ahead and click discard on this and carry on with the rest of the deployment. So for the resource group name, I'll go ahead and create a new resource group, and I'll call that what we have in the instruction, 20533D0203. So I think we already have 0201 and 0202 created by the scripts that we ran earlier. So I'll leave that. For the vNet name, I'll go ahead and specify what's in the instruction, which is this. For the vNet address prefix, I'll change this to 10.10. And for the subnet 1 prefix, I'll change that to 10.10 also. And subnet 2 prefix, I'll change that to 10.10. So once I have that configured, if I scroll down a bit more, I can agree to the terms and conditions and then click on purchase. So what this would do is it's going to deploy an Azure virtual network with the 2 subnets within them that I specify. So that's using an Azure ARM template for the deployment. So that's all done. If I go under resource groups and then if I go under my resource group here, should be able to see my virtual network. And if I go within the virtual network and go under subnet, I should see my 2 subnets there. So let's move on to the next exercise. So the next exercise, we're going to be creating a virtual network using Azure PowerShell. And our goal will be to create a virtual network called 20533D0204 vNet with this address space of 10.11. We used 10.10 earlier. And then it's going to have a single subnet, not 2 like we did earlier in it. And we're going to put it in this resource group. Let's go ahead and do that now. So to do that, I'll bring up Azure PowerShell. I'll use CLS to clear the screen. And if I'm not yet logged into my Azure environment, I can use add Azure RM account to log in, but I'm already logged in, so I'll skip that. What I'll do though is I want to get a list of my Azure subscriptions, and I can see I have only 1 subscription. If you're working in an environment where you have multiple subscriptions, one of the command that you may want to run is this command to set Azure RM context. In other words, to specify the subscription that you want to use for the resource that you'll be deploying. So you put in your subscription ID here, and then you press enter to that, and then it's going to select that subscription for whatever resource that you'll be creating. Next thing that I'll do is I'll use this command over here to create a new resource group called 20533D0204. Already created 01, 02, and 03. I'll modify where it says Azure region here and use the same region that I used for my other resources. In my case, I used West Europe. I'll go ahead and specify that and press enter to that. and that's created. Going back to resource groups, I should have my new resource group there. Let's move on. So the next thing that I'll do is I'll create my Azure virtual network using this command here. And I'm using the command new Azure RM virtual network. Now, because I already stored the resource group that I created earlier in a variable, then I can refer to separate parameters of that resource. So I'm referring to the resource group name here, and I'm referring to the location here. So if I go ahead and press enter to that, what this will do is it's going to create a new virtual network within my resource group in the location that my resource group is in, and it's going to have this address space. If I go back to Azure portal and go to my resource group, I can see here that I have my virtual network. Let's go back. So that's all fully created now. But if I go back to my virtual network and I click on it and I go on the subnet, I realize that I have no subnet in it. So then I'll go ahead and add a subnet configuration to my virtual network using this command here, add Azure RM virtual network subnet configuration. I'm calling it subnet 1, and the address prefix is 10.11.0.0/24. If I go ahead and press enter to that, so that's done. But if I go back to my virtual network, you realize I still don't have a subnet. That's because I've just created a configuration. Now I have to apply the configuration to my virtual network. And I'll do that using this command over here. And if I press enter to that, that will actually apply that configuration. And once that is done, I'll be able to see my subnet over there. So now that we're done here, let's move on to the next exercise. In this next exercise, we'll be creating a virtual network by using Azure CLI. So similar to what we did earlier, we'll create a new virtual network that ends with 05, address space 10.12 this time, and it's going to have two subnets. And we're going to put it in a new resource group that also ends in 05. So we already have 01, 02, 03, 04. But now we're going to have 05. Let's go ahead and do that. To do that, I'm going to right click on command prompt and run it as administrator. And the first thing that I need to do is to log into my Azure account using Azure CLI. So Azure login, I'll go to the URL that was given, and I'm going to input the code that's displayed on the screen. And then click on continue. And then it says I'm signed in. So going back, I'm already signed into my account now. So the next thing that I'll do is I'll just do a quick AZ account shows me the same information that I have earlier. The next thing that I want to do is I'm going to run this command. It's not one that I need to run actually, but because it's one that you need to run only if you have multiple Azure subscriptions. In my own case, I only have one Azure subscription. So I will need to select amongst multiple subscriptions. So if I leave that, and if I go ahead and select my ID here, and if I press enter to that, I have my subscription selected. Again, if you have a single subscription, you don't need to do that. You can skip that last step. So then I'm going to run the next command to create a new resource group called 20533D0205, and I'm going to modify where it says Azure region to be the region that I've been deploying my other resources, which is West Europe. And if I press enter to that, it's created my resource group. So if I go back onto resource groups and refresh, I have my new resource group there. So what I'll do is within this resource group, I'm going to create a new virtual network. So let's go ahead and get the command for that. And I'll paste that. So that AZ network create a virtual network with this name. And I'm going to create one subnet within it with that configuration. The only thing that I need to modify here is the location. I'll change that from where it says Azure region to the region I've been using for the rest of my deployment, which is West Europe. And then if I press enter to that. So that may take a while to complete. Going back here, if I go under my resource group, I should see my Azure Virtual Network show up very soon. So let's just give it a while. As you can see, that's my new virtual network. If I click on that, and if I go under subnet, I should have a single subnet there. So that's fully created now. So the next thing that I'll do is I'll add an extra subnet configuration to make it 2 subnets within that virtual network. And I'll do that using the AZ network vNet subnet create. And I'm going to give it that address prefix and the name of the subnet, the resource group, and the vNet. If I go ahead and press enter to that, so if I click on the DNS servers and then click back on the subnet, I have my second subnet. So that concludes this exercise. To avoid the video going too long, I think I'll stop this recording now, and then I'll break it into 2 parts. So in the very next recording, I'll carry on with this. So if I bring these up, what I'll do is in the next recording, I'll carry on with lab number B, where we configure our vNet peering and custom routing. So I'll see you in the next recording. Bye for now.